Hello friend, and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Adam Ayers, and I've been in software development and architecture for nearly 15 years. In this video, we're going to see what it looks like to host an application in Azure using Azure App Services. We'll be creating a small .NET web application to host in Azure. We'll use the Azure portal to create the Azure App Service along with the new resource group. We'll deploy our application to Azure from Visual Studio, and ultimately we'll connect our application to the GitHub repository and utilize GitHub Actions to manage our deployments. Let's get started. We'll start with our web application. As you can see, it's pretty bare bones. I simply used the ASP.NET Razor Pages template inside of Visual Studio 2022 and cleaned out a bunch of the fluff. Now, there are no external dependencies such as a database or the use of a file system. It is seriously a basic web page containing only a welcome screen and basic error handling. Nonetheless, it is a perfect candidate to use for our objective. So let's jump over to the Azure portal. From here, we're going to select App Services. We can find this in the Azure Services shortcut menu or search for it in the main search box. Once selected, I'm going to click the Create button located on the left-hand side of the menu. When you click this, there are three options currently. There's the new web app plus database, or WordPress on app service. For this video, we're going to select web app. Once this screen loads, we need to make sure our subscription is selected. And for resource group, we're going to create a new one. We'll name this YouTube Demo Resources. Under the instance details for our app name, I'm going to name this YouTube Demo. I'm going to leave code selected under the Publish option. And for runtime stack, I'm going to select .NET 8 LTS, or long-term support. We'll leave Windows selected for the operating system. And for the region, I'm going to select something a bit closer to me in East US. Under pricing plans, we're going to create a new one as well. Click on the Create New button. We're going to name this YouTube Demo Service Plan. And click OK. For pricing plan, I'm going to select the free tier for this example. I'm going to click Next for database, and here I'm going to leave this unchecked. We'll have a video in the future about how to connect to a database from an app service instance. Next, for deployment, I'm going to leave the continuous deployment option disabled. We'll be connecting to our GitHub repository later on in this video, so we won't do that during the creation wizard. Something that I do want to do, however, is make sure that basic authentication is enabled. When trying to deploy from Visual Studio, it's going to require that. For networking, I'm going to leave public access on, and this option down here is not available to me. Under monitoring security, I'm going to elect to leave application insights disabled, and we'll also leave the enable defender for app service unchecked. Next, I'm going to review and create. This gives me an opportunity to look through all of the settings, make sure I don't need to go back and change anything, and once I'm satisfied, I will click the Create button. This does take a few moments to deploy, but by the power of video, we won't have to wait too long. Now that our app service has been created, you'll notice that the status is running, and if we navigate to our default domain, we get a page letting us know that the application is ready for code. So let's head over to Visual Studio and publish using the Publish profile. In Visual Studio, I'll right-click on the web application and select Publish. I'll select Azure for the target and App Service Windows for the specific target. Because my Microsoft account is tied to Visual Studio, it preloads my subscription. Below, you'll see my available resource groups. I'm going to select the YouTube Demo resource and our YouTube Demo web application. I'll click Next, and we'll generate the pub.xml file and click Finish. Once the profile is created, I'll click Publish. And as you can see, the deployment was successful. While deploying with Visual Studio is super convenient, it's likely not how you'll be handling your production deployments. For that, we'll use GitHub Actions. So let's head back over to our Azure portal under our App Service YouTube demo, and we'll go to the Deployments section. Under the Deployments section, select the Deployment Center. From here, we can associate this app service to our GitHub repository. From the Deployment Center, I'm going to select GitHub for my source. My GitHub account is already associated with my Azure subscription, so I don't need to sign in. I'll select the organization, and I'll select the repository, in this case YouTube App Service Demo, and I'll select the main branch. From here, I have two options. I can request that Azure create a workflow file for me and put it in my repository, or if I had one available already, I could use it. I'll go ahead and request Azure create a workflow file for me. Under Authentication type, I'll go ahead and leave the user assigned identity selected, and I'll have it create a new identity for me. And once I'm ready, I'll click Save. Now, let's head over to GitHub and see what files it created for us. In our repository, you'll notice a new folder under GitHub called Workflows. In this folder, there's a new YAML file named main_YouTube demo. Now, let's head over to Visual Studio and check out our GitHub Actions. This is our GitHub workflow file, and it's where all of our GitHub actions are composed. Thankfully, we don't have to make any changes to this file, but I do want to briefly touch on its anatomy before we move on. The first thing to notice is that there are three top-level properties. The first is the name. This is the name of the GitHub workflow and can be anything you'd like. Note that it is used to identify the deployment in the GitHub UI, so having a meaningful name is always a good idea. To see your workflow in GitHub, click on the Action menu item, and all the workflows will be listed on the left. You'll notice here that this is the same name that's found in our file. Second is our triggers. In our case, there are two triggers. The first occurs when a push is made to the main branch, and the second, Workflow Dispatch, allows us to manually trigger a deployment through the GitHub UI. For example, if I click on the workflow, you'll see that I have this Run Workflow option. This allows me to run our GitHub Actions from the UI. Third is jobs. Each job has a name, such as build or deploy, a few qualifiers, and then a collection of steps. In our workflow, we have two jobs. The first is build, which checks out, builds, and creates our application artifact, and deploy, which uploads that artifact to Azure. In the deploy job, you'll notice there are three secrets used when logging into Azure. Azure automatically created these for us, and they can be found inside of GitHub by going to the Settings, Secrets and Variables, and Actions. Here you'll see the repository secrets. You'll also notice in the Deploy to Azure step that the app name matches the name of our app service. This is intentional, and the slot name is Production. This is because we selected the free pricing tier. Because we've selected the free pricing tier, we only have the production slot available. Back to GitHub, under Actions, we can select our workflow and look at the history. In our case, we have one run. This happened when Azure did the commit to the main branch. When I click this, I can see a couple of helpful things. I can see the jobs that were executed, along with the artifact that was produced. I can also view things like the duration and of course the status. Back over in Azure, you'll notice now that I have my GitHub project connected. And if I go to the Deployment Center, I can see a list of logs that show me the deployment history. And that's it. That's how you host an application using Azure App Services and deploy using GitHub Actions. I hope you learned something from this video, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.